tú dijiste de países con dictaduras, como Chile, la Argentina, ¿esos cineastas venían a lograr sus proyectos en Cuba o venían para entrenar en Cuba y luego volver a su país? ¿Cómo era la cuestión?
Bueno, a ver, los cineastas de esos países casi siempre lo que pasó es que salieron de sus países de origen y entonces de algún modo fueron a protegerse a Cuba, ¿no? O las obras de ellos fueron a protegerse y terminarse en Cuba. Ahora mismo, el año pasado, estuvo en Cuba la presidenta de Chile anterior, Michelle Bachelet, y nosotros le entregamos 94 obras, es decir, 94 películas chilenas que estaban guardadas en nuestras bóvedas y que ellos no tenían en su país. No estoy hablando de 94 largometrajes, sino 94 obras que habían sido o filmadas o realizadas por cineastas chilenos o por cineastas cubanos, pero que tenían que ver con Chile.
Del 73 para atrás.
De la época de las dictaduras. Entonces, estas películas a veces se filmaban, sacaban las películas del país y las películas venían a Cuba y ahí se hacía la postproducción, ¿no? Se armaban esas películas, se ponían cuando se podían poner, y algunas de ellas, por ejemplo, van a ser vistas por primera vez en Chile ahora. Están en un proceso de restauración.
Muy bien, gracias. Maria, as we now go from Cuba to Argentina, being that this is about the business of filmmaking and you are the #1 institution in Argentina for producing filmmakers, I'm curious to learn about Argentine cinema in your country, how Argentine cinema goes to Latin America, and does, besides the fact that, you know, the best foreign film award just went, you know, an Academy Award for an Argentine film, how much Argentine cinema really does come to the United States, or does it go to other parts of the world?
Well, hello, good evening. Well, Argentine cinema doesn't go to the US especially. I think the public of the US doesn't even know the Argentine cinema, even though we have just won an Oscar. That's not the kind of Argentinian films we usually make. The Argentine cinema, it's the new Argentine cinema. We're going to talk about the new Argentine cinema, it's the one I can talk about. Normally, it's the cinema that has success in festivals, critics, but never with public. The public in Argentina or in other countries doesn't go to the cinema to see Argentine films. That's the truth.
So what are they watching?
The American films mostly. American films usually are the ones that fill all the cinemas. Argentina doesn't have like a policy of promoting Argentinian films. We don't have a law that protects our own cinema, so that's why the Argentinian cinema goes to the cinemas for such a short amount of time, and all the tanks, as we call the American movies, fill the whole cinema. The Argentinian films have a very tradition of good films, even in festivals. We win prizes, festivals, but it's never about money. Argentinian films never make money. It's true. That's the truth. I don't know if in any country the artistic films make money or not, but the ones that we promote as a university that teaches filmmaking are the artistic films that are not the ones that make money, really.
And tell me also, I mean, what was interesting about our conversation was, and also that Argentines also, as much as they do see the popular US cinema, they also are larger consumers of European cinema.
We have to divide the public into the general public consumes the American cinema, but the people that love cinema consumes most the European cinema. The filmmakers look to Europe, not to the US, to to learn about cinema. The real filmmakers of the Nouvelle Vague in France, those are like the mentors of the New Argentine cinema.
Which would you say, I mean, it was part of our discussion earlier, which cinema do you think is the best in Latin America at this time?
Wow, what a tough question.
Slightly subjective, I mean, close to an Argentine. So.
I can say the Argentine cinema is the best, but I can say that the Cuban cinema, the Mexican cinema has a problem that the Mexican filmmakers are looking to the US. They try to cross the Rio Grande as soon as they can. So the good filmmakers in Mexico suddenly go to Hollywood, and there's the end of the Mexican cinema. But really, I think there's very good Brazilian cinema. There is very good Cuban cinema, and now there are some emerging countries like Peru that are beginning to have a very good cinema. You can see in the festivals like Berlinale or Cannes Film Festival, Peruvian movies winning awards. And I think the small cinematographers are growing in all the countries.
Who is Argentina and Argentine filmmakers doing co-productions with?
Basically with Europe, because the money is there. It's the truth. We are making, Argentina produces around 100 films a year. Around 50 of them are supported by the National Institute of Cinematography, that's like the CAI, I think, the INCA. But mostly they support like the commercial cinema, and then the other half of the cinema is like supported by the filmmakers with our support of the Universidad del Cine and like cooperation with themselves. And there are a small amount of co-productions with Europe, especially with France and Spain.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Jeff, when she was touching on art films, not making money and stuff like that, can you touch on that? How has that experience been? When she says, you know,
Sure.
Art films really don't make money.
Well, I think that's certainly true. I think that at times they do, obviously. And the important thing is to try to find a way to sustain the structure of making the films. Because normally you're looking towards, in sort of the independent sector, you're looking towards bringing in equity investment, and in order to do that, you need to sort of convince them that there's a viable business model, which is extremely difficult to do. It's funny, as they were speaking, I really thought of American independent filmmakers who are also under siege by Hollywood. In other words, to group all American films together is somewhat of a misnomer. And though I've produced films, and many of my films are distributed by the major distributors or the many majors, it still has the same feeling about it. That you have this onslaught that you have to confront, and there's a public that's really not amenable towards voices that are more challenging or more, that are making films that are less about entertainment and more about providing some kind of challenge or an experience or an exploration. And similarly, as we're talking about Cuba, you know, I was almost envious to think, wow, there's actually a sort of organization you can go towards and have a conversation with and submit a proposal to and have a sort of a rational discussion. You know, I just got finished producing a film called The Kids Are All Right, which ultimately was sold to Focus, and it will be a relatively, for an independent film, it'll be a relatively major film, but it took 8 years to make, and ultimately the partners which we brought into the film are these horrible, beastly, conniving, just avaricious, people. It has nothing to do with art, not even much to do with commerce, because rational investors won't go to film, they'll do something else that's rational. So the people who invest in film are particularly, and they have money, so they feel entitled and all-powerful. And they invest in film really to, in my experience, after 15 films, to really explore their sadomasochistic tendencies.
Like trauma.
Exactly. So it really, it's the job of the producer to try to mediate between that and the artistry that's happening in front of the camera or around the camera, which makes, I think, making films in the United States, I think, particularly difficult. You know, you allude to co-production agreements, and the United States, for whatever reason, and I have my speculation, has no treaties with any other country, nor any formal subsidies, although we do have these tax rebates driven by states, and there's also a federal rebate. But it's a very different system than what you have in Europe, in Canada, and I assume also in Latin America, which gives you kind of a floor or a basis that you can begin to put a film together. Here it's really a
Like the Film Board of Canada.
Yeah, or any of the, or in every major
Western country.
every major Western country has it, and I think a lot of countries around the world outside of Europe have it. In the U.S., really, I guess it's the sense that sort of it's this sort of successful, vibrant industry. Thus, we don't need a structure like that, and you certainly don't need it for Hollywood films. To find every way to sort of manipulate the system and get and for them to make profitable films. But for independent filmmakers, you know, it's extremely difficult. You know.
I mean, I was really surprised to see that we don't have treaties. Like, I know that Argentina does films with Spain. Cuba has gotten films produced with Spain, and so on. But I found interesting, Ry Cooder got $1.5 million from German public television, German and French public television, to do Buena Vista Social Club. So that's a U.S. film, but it aired on German and French public television. So I found that interesting.
I mean, that's very common. I mean, again, Kids Are All Right. About 3/5 of the finance came out of France, out of UGC. I just did a film called Soul Power, which went to Sony in the Western Hemisphere, and then I went to a company called Cellular Dreams for the rest. But actually, the European was a much more lucrative and stable place from which to get financing from. You know, in fact, in that it was very interesting because there was the issue of who would take Latin America. Would it be Sony or would it be Cellular Dreams? And basically, both thought that it wasn't particularly valuable economically. So it sort of became this sort of side point, and they batted back, and finally went to Sony, which is somewhat unfortunate because they just they don't really promote it in a way that is kind of grassroots. They just put it out on TV and video. And
You were talking about distribution.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
As having done 15 films, and as you also just shared that, you know, a number of big, large companies have picked it up, do you still consider yourself an independent filmmaker?
Yeah, and I think the real distinction is I don't finance my films through studios. When I've sold to, you know, many majors, Fox or Sony or Focus, which is part of Universal. Nor do I have a studio deal. You know, they don't want to deal with me.
How viable has Latin America been for your 15 films as a distribution, you know, outlet that produces money?
You know, normally we don't see the money directly because it goes through a foreign sales agent, or like when we did 13, that went through Fox, so that was just the Fox global system. So there's not many ways where we see it that's monetized in a significant way, or at least in my experience. There may be ways to do it.
But is Latin America a major business market for you? Or is it an insignificant market, or?
For me, it's not. I've always tried to, I mean, I had real hope for Soul Power because a major portion of it is it's a film about a concert in Zaire in 1974, basically with R&B acts. Then, on top of that, you have the Fania All-Stars. It's amazing, you know, New York, but of course, Latin band. And I know, and when I hear back, it's been in festivals in Latin America, and people love the film, but it didn't necessarily connect to a business side. I think it's a similar thing that we're talking about. I think films that aren't, you know, these, you know, megalithic, you know, Hollywood crap, you know, it's hard to monetize, and really you're just sort of piecing together the pennies to sort of finance them and put them into the world, you know,
Gotcha.
in my experience.
In your experience. Fernando, as a lawyer, have you done any deals for co-productions, foreign financing of U.S. Latino filmmakers or otherwise?
Yes, I've worked on from the executive producer's financing perspective. which is the party that I represented, I worked on a project, a movie entitled La Soga, and it was written. It was written by the lead in the movie, and he was also one of the producers. He is, I may be I'm not entirely sure if he was born here in the States, or born in the Dominican Republic and reared in the States, but he's definitely of Washington Heights. His name is Matty Perez. And so the film was produced on location for the most part, almost entirely in the Dominican Republic. And being, the savvy, resourceful indie filmmakers that you need to be in the film business, you can't rely just simply on, an angel funder, entirely private equity. They, through another client of mine who's in the movie, contacted a company in the Dominican Republic that is in media in the Dominican Republic. They own a good number of the TV stations and the radio stations in the Dominican Republic and some print media, and they've also produced some films locally. The thing is that the films that they produce locally are meant for a local palette, and it's interesting that we were commenting earlier because actually, at least in the Dominican Republic, their local films, they're not art house films, but their local films do better than the studio films. People in the Dominican Republic.
The U.S. studio films?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really shocking to me. I would have never thought that any film could beat Spider-Man 2 in the Dominican Republic, but they do, apparently. And I'm relying on my clients to tell me this, and consumers. When I was at a film festival there, the average consumer attested to that. Dominicans want to see their images there, and they want to go to see them. Now, the films in the Dominican Republic that are produced there and fully financed there, they cater to a particular palette, which tends to be highly influenced by the media there, which tends to be a good amount of the consumer or the viewership tends to be variety shows and soap operas. And as much as some people may balk at soap operas, we all know how well La Madrastra did here in the States when I forgot what year, 2 years ago, this soap opera beat even Americans' ratings for the finales, right? So they understand that my clients, the film financiers, they understand that market. And so there isn't a co-production treaty with the Dominican Republic. Instead, the filmmakers entered into an agreement that involved a co-production arrangement. And as Jeff was saying earlier, it took on a sort of a pre-sale in exchange for a certain amount of money. My clients would get the right to distribute the film there in the Dominican Republic. Now, that being said, my clients only ventured into that because it was a film, again, filmed in the Dominican Republic about the Dominican Republic, about a particular element in a particular, it was a critique of a particular politic in the Dominican Republic, essentially corruption in the Dominican Republic. And so they felt that that was something that wasn't too foreign to them, and they could in all likelihood recoup if they couldn't recoup their investment from a sale in the United States, they felt they could certainly recoup their investment in the Dominican Republic because they've done it before. Their films, they fund their films anywhere between $300,000 and $800,000, and all of their films make them profit. They recoup their money and make a profit in the Dominican Republic. So they said we could probably do this with this, and they're still convinced they can. There isn't a formal arrangement, but if you're a creative filmmaker and you have to be, especially nowadays when it's very difficult. It's always been difficult, as I understand, to get anyone to give you money. In fact, even at the film did well at the Toronto Film Festival. After the screening, during the Q&A, one of the filmmakers, and he was, very excited to be obviously having his film at this Toronto Film Festival. He commented, said, "Yeah, we were the typical sort of anecdote about how much they really worked and struggled to finance the film and get it done." And they said, yeah, we were surprised that anybody would be crazy enough to give us any money. And of course, I'm sitting next to my client, which is one of the financiers, and he said, am I crazy? I guess I'm crazy. And I said, he needs it, dear, trust me. But it's true. It's very difficult. So you have to be creative, and that's an instance where it worked out well, and it will hopefully work out. It worked out well for the filmmaker, naturally. Hopefully it'll work out well for my clients and people who finance the film, and for the Dominican Republic, because it's the first film that from the Dominican Republic that's gotten into a major film festival.
As a Latino filmmaker, we're often frustrated that our films are supported more by a non-Latino audience than a Latino audience. And I'm curious, has the ICAIC ever conducted any analysis studies who in the United States consumes modern Cuban films more? Is it a non-Latino audience or Latino audience? El ICAIC ha hecho estudios para analizar quién consume el cine cubano en este país más, el no latino o el latino.
No tenemos hecho ese estudio, es decir, eso no lo podría decir aquí porque no sería una información veraz la que voy a dar.
Tu percepción o lo que tú ves cuando vas a los festivales,
A ver,
¿quién tú ves el público ahí?
Mi percepción es que en los festivales de cine, los festivales de cine en general, dentro de los Estados Unidos, que más aceptan el cine cubano y el cine latinoamericano son los que están destinados al cine latino. En el resto de los festivales, que son internacionales, tenemos que competir con películas de todo el mundo, solamente para entrar al festival. Por tanto, el cine cubano y latinoamericano, donde en el sistema de festivales, donde más circula es en los festivales latinos. Y también el público que tiene en esos festivales es fundamentalmente un público latino. Es un público latino y organizado inclusive por o cineastas o críticos o personas que están vinculadas al medio en un origen latino. Yo quería decir algo. Cuando estábamos hablando de la distribución, el caso específico de Argentina, cuando se realizan los festivales del nuevo cine latinoamericano de La Habana, en Cuba, el cine más popular, el que tiene más aceptación del público es el cine argentino, aunque no necesariamente es el más premiado por el jurado. Por ejemplo, el cine brasileño ha obtenido más premios en el Festival de La Habana que el cine argentino, pero el cine argentino es más visto por el público que el cine brasileño, por poner un ejemplo. En el caso específico de las producciones de cine cubano, las películas que más se ven en Cuba, las que más taquilla tienen, que pueden tener desde 1 millón hasta 2 millones de espectadores, y nosotros somos 12 millones de habitantes, son las películas cubanas, y las películas realizadas por cineastas cubanos. En el Festival de La Habana, que se realizan 10 días y se presentan entre 300 o 400 películas, a veces 500, pero depende de la época, si es mejor o peor. Tenemos 500.000 de espectadores cada año, habitualmente. Y ese 500.000 de espectadores lo que va a ver es fundamentalmente cine latinoamericano. Nosotros en Cuba sí vemos bastante cine latinoamericano, algún que otro cine independiente, pero bueno, como ustedes conocen, también vemos cine europeo, pero fundamentalmente en eventos que organiza el ICAI. Es decir, el ICAI a lo largo de todo el año organiza distintas semanas, muestras, festivales de cine de cualquier lugar del mundo, ¿no? Pueden ser lo mismo de la India, que cine africano, y ahí es donde nosotros podemos ver el cine más diverso. Hubo alrededor de 5 años atrás, teníamos el mismo problema que todos los países del mundo. Lo único que se veía prácticamente eran películas norteamericanas de los grandes estudios, no de cineastas independientes. a partir de, desde hace 2 años es que hemos logrado que en las salas de cine también se estrenen un 60% de cines de otras latitudes, de cualquier lugar del mundo, y un 40% de cine que se ve desde los Estados Unidos. O sea, esa ha sido más o menos en los 2 últimos años la correlación entre las películas de los Estados Unidos, de los grandes estudios, y las películas del resto del mundo. Había otra cosita que yo quería decir, y es que los gobiernos de los países iberoamericanos, en las cumbres de presidentes de sus países, acordaron un proyecto que se llama Ibermedia. Ese proyecto es uno de los proyectos que se ha sostenido desde que existen las cumbres de presidentes de Iberoamérica. Es decir, es uno de los pocos proyectos que tiene éxito, de los pocos acuerdos que se han cumplido realmente. Y ahí están como los que dirigen la cinematografía de cada país reunido. Están unidos también porque cada país pone una determinada cantidad de dinero para financiar proyectos. Esos proyectos que financia Ibermedia son obligatoriamente proyectos de coproducción, donde tienen que participar 2 o más países iberoamericanos. Y eso para mí es muy importante porque es una pequeña posibilidad que tienen los diferentes países latinoamericanos. El que más dinero da es España, que pone 2 millones, los demás ponemos 200.000, 150.000, 500.000, en fin, para vincularse entre sí los cineastas y también para desarrollar cinematografías que están naciendo ahora. Por ejemplo, en Centroamérica prácticamente no hay cinematografía, y entonces ahora están comenzando a participar de ese proyecto. Guatemala, Panamá se inscribió muy recientemente, algunos países también del Caribe, como República Dominicana. Es decir, hay un grupo de países que no han
están aprovechando y
están aprovechando,
beneficiándonos.
Yo creo que nos beneficiamos todos,
Sí.
porque es muy cruel que nosotros veamos o solo cine argentino,
Sí.
porque tienen una industria desarrollada desde hace muchos años, o mexicano o brasileño, que son las 3 industrias
Sí.
fuertes en el continente, y no podamos ver una película de República Dominicana,
Sí.
una película de Guatemala, de Nicaragua, de El Salvador, porque no tienen cómo producir cine.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo. Being in the throes, Fernando, of working with a lot of Latino filmmakers, what your philosophies on, that the Latino audience in the United States doesn't support Latino films as much, that our audience, when we go to the theaters, we see much more of a non-Latino audience. Is that something that you've seen? Is that something you've seen? Did you agree with? What are your thoughts on that?
This is a little beyond the scope of my duties as an attorney, but I do get wind of comments like that from clients or from listservs or the only thing I can say to that is that I find that often part of the problem is that the distributors, broadcasters, don't hire the right people to market the film. And when they do, they bundle. There's no such thing, in my opinion, as a Hispanic market. There really isn't. There's the Mexican market, there's the Tejano market, there's the Chicano market, there's, there's the Puerto Rican market, there's the New Yorker market, it really does vary. And so because of that, I think they can bundle us all into one category. And even distributors who are good at what they do, the box office shows. I mean, you have a movie, and I'm personally a real fan of Sony Pictures Classics movies. I think they do an excellent job of marketing their movies. But in some instances, in the instance of Sugar, I don't know that they partnered with the right people, because that movie Sugar, I think it made something like $50,000 $50,000 was a gross in terms of box office. for the foreign market, and that would include the Dominican Republic, and it was distributed in the Dominican Republic, and Sugar Deals was a baseball player. I suspect that had they partnered with the right people, and this is obviously a little biased of me, but including my clients who understand that market very well, then we would have done a lot more than that. You know, and you know, I had this conversation with some people at 23 Pictures Classics when we were with my clients meeting with them, and he asked me, he said, well, he said, our movie, if we'd have helped distribute that movie, we would have easily, you know, made, you know, $250,000 for you from the Dominican Republic alone, right? And you know, they say that from a perspective of we've done it before with other movies that are not as good as Sugar. You understand? So part of it is that they must have hired someone locally to market it. They must have hired, but they didn't know who they were. And so I think that's part of the problem, that they don't, I don't know if it's general market, I don't know if it's a studio-based company, I don't know if it's the mini majors that are really based out of studios, that they don't understand the Latino market, whatever that may be, or that they don't hire people that, for specific projects, they go to the usual suspects, who will then hire someone, you know, the publicity, the key publicist, the key, you know, marketing strategist, who everyone hires, who tend to be the same ones at Sundance and at Toronto, who then may at the most hire someone who is Latino and who has some instances, or they want to hire someone, and this may be a little blunt to me, maybe a native informant, but doesn't really know, doesn't have their ear to the ground. So I think that's part of the problem. You know?
For filmmakers, not only do we have to raise money for our projects, but when we get money, we have to be very conservative and we have to be very frugal with the money. So I'm seeing lots of Latino filmmakers and Spanish-speaking entities from the US and throughout Latin America producing a lot in Argentina because it's cheaper to do it, it's cheaper to shoot there. The film I saw from Mexico, from Colombia today, La Pasión de Gabriel, it was color corrected in Argentina. So, you know, what's happening there? Are you seeing lots of Latin American productions and some projects from the United States? Wasn't it Clint Eastwood just shot a film there recently? So are you seeing a lot of productions happening from throughout Latin America in Argentina?
Yes, they are. There are many reasons for that. One is they are cheap. We have now not so much because the currency has raised. It used to be cheap some years ago. Another very important thing is that we have very good technicians. In Argentina, there are 12,000 students of film. Those are a lot of technicians that can make the crew of anything. We have a lot of landscapes. We have mountains, we have falls, we have a city, Buenos Aires is a city that can be Paris or Madrid or Rome. So we have, like, we say that it's a set of sets. So Buenos Aires or Argentina, it's a good environment for making movies. That's why if you walk the streets of Buenos Aires nowadays, you find in each corner a commercial being shot. And then you see it and it's, for example, Renault or a brand of car, anything, they make it in Argentina and then they show it internationally. Those are the reasons. The cheap of the very cheap technicians, the very good technicians, and the variety of landscape and cities.
In talking a little bit about the business of filmmaking, Jeff, you've done a number of films with leading actors in it. For filmmakers, what advice do you have when you want to approach a well-established actor? Who, either in your evolution, how did you start doing it, how do you do it now? What's your formula in regard to, if you want a well-established actor, who do you hit first? Do you hit the actor directly, the business manager, the agent, a friend? How have you secured those actors from high art to station agent and other films?
Sure. Well, you know, actors, they tend, particularly the more successful actors, have sort of walls built around them, you know, multiple walls, and it's extremely difficult to to make your way in. I mean, of course, if you have some sort of personal connection, but it has to be the right one. People really have to be able to approach them kind of with a dignity to it. If you're just going to sort of throw the script over the wall, it will absolutely yield nothing. In fact, it'll have a negative result. They're going to be afraid of you and want a restraining order. I mean, the way I've done it, I mean, it's shifted over the years, you know, since I began. I mean, the way we do it now primarily is you go through agents. So the real question is, how do you get an agent to listen to you and to respect what you've done? And really, it's something that you need to build over years. Either you associate with somebody who has experience and has experiences with these actors or these agents. That's probably the easiest way, to be honest. Or you sort of, over time, you attempt to approach the agent, talk to them, write letters to them. But this could take quite a long time because, for the most part, people are looking for two things. They're looking for three things. Money, as much more money the better. If you can't offer that, they're looking for quality, but that's always connected to the ability to get a film distributed. I mean, in Kids Are All Right, for instance, just as the last film, this is a recent example, we have Annette Bening, Julianne Moore, and Mark Ruffalo, and Mia Wasikowska, who's a new actress, but really a fantastic young actress. And basically the way that started in particular is that Julianne Moore saw High Art, right? It's the same director, and it's about 12 years apart. Sort of they had a conversation 10 years ago, you know, and in a way we worked the script, wrote a part for her, and were able to sort of bring her into the process and keep her in the process, because then even after we had the script, it took another 5 years, right? Even with Julianne Moore. And at Bain, we actually share an agent, right? And we had another sort of connection with within that. So, you know, look, there's no magic formula, but it's I guess the only thing it comes down to is being persistent and being very aware of all of the possible levels of connection that you might have to somebody, and always comporting yourself in a very kind of direct and careful and non-stalking fashion, illegal fashion, but not being overly egotistical. I mean, I can't tell you the number of filmmakers that just felt they have written or they have in their position the most important script, you know, ever conceived of, and that they're just going to get the door slammed in their face every single time, you know. But, you know, as you kind of work through it, you find ways, but it really is this very careful, persistent, and like a notebook where you are figuring out every person you've met and where they can possibly lead you and how you can incrementally make your way. But that's like a whole career, you know, of having to make a movie. And that's really what it takes to get the bigger talent, if you can't pay them. Of course, if you have the money, then anybody will return your call.
Last year at the Tribeca Film Festival, opened up the color. Is that the beginning of something? And what I'm getting at is Latin America for us Latino filmmakers and non-Latino filmmakers. Is it still an untapped market? Are the borders coming down? Is there hope for the future in regard to it being a viable market, which I think for some is still a second thought or an afterthought?
No, I think, you know, to sound a little brusque or a little tacky, you know, beggars can't be choosers. You got to go where you can go to get the money, you know, and the resources is not the money that amounts to cash if it's in kind. And again, with that example, the filmmaker is very smart. You know, they tap into all their connections, and as it turns out, it worked. It turned out well because, you know, this gentleman, he went back home for it, and he had a sense of pride that he wanted to talk about something, talk about this issue, this level of this controversial issue that's a pretty universal issue. You know, corruption, right? Government corruption. So for him, it worked out well that he went back home and he used his, you know, his resources to be able to tap into that market. I think that it should be more of that. I'm just disappointed that we don't have a co-production, you know, the United States with those countries, because I think that it would have been a lot easier for those filmmakers. And I think a lot more filmmakers that are either born here or reared here from Latin America are probably more inclined to set up these sorts of arrangements. You understand? I mean, the closest thing we can come to that is the NEA, and with the NEA, you know, it's mostly for
For the
documentary.
National Endowment of the Arts.
Yeah, and that, you know, or NEH, and it's mostly documentaries, and you end up having naked men in it, you know, because they're very conservative. Ever since what, Maplethorpe, you know,
Right.
that's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? So, you know, if we had more of that, I think that you would find a lot more, because, you know, there's a resurgence of Latinos born here who have a real connection with the country of their parents' origin, who identify not necessarily as being, you know, Dominican American or Dominican York, you know, or Puerto Rican, you know, or Colombian Americans. They're Colombian, they're Puerto Rican, and you see that they're bilingual. In fact, they're not. It's not Spanglish anymore that we talk. You know, we speak both languages. We're dual lingual sometimes. You know what I mean? I mean, our Spanish may not be that great, but we try. And considering that some of us are from the inner city schools, like here, at least in New York, you know what I mean? We're lucky that we can speak English. You know what I mean? So, but you know that's something that I think you find a lot more because of that sense of pride.
Gotcha. Definitely want it open up to the floor. Questions, please. So. Your name, sorry, where you're from?
Well, my name is Sol Rivera. I am from Puerto Rico, but I lived here for over 21 years. I wanted to kind of discuss, because there are a few things that really sparked me. I'm a film publicist. I do Latino film publicist, and I worked with El Cantante and Sugar, Julie Cursi, and Trenos, which is I'm representing the film right now. It's going to open in a couple of weeks. And I know Soul Power, and in my experience with Latino or Latin American movies and Spanish, wow.
You must have said something.
I must have said something. But if you can hear me, that's the most important part. I think there's something really interesting happening. All of a sudden, all these films have just kind of come my way. And in terms, I had a very interesting experience with Sugar, because it was like really the first film that I had to work in the indie side, because El Cantante was such a big monster beast, you know, because it had Jennifer and Mark. It had a whole different dynamic. But with Sugar, I really hear what you're saying, because I feel like sometimes what's happening with Latino and these Spanish films is that they don't necessarily fit within the industry standards of marketing. And for every film is really particular, and it's really, I think it's now they're coming at us faster than at the rate that and as a whole, the different teams can kind of understand how to get it together. And when I came to Sugar, I was the new kid on the block, you know, working with them, so they wouldn't hear necessarily what I would, you know, ideas that I had, and as all these, you know, these few years keep coming and these movies keep going, I think, you know, there's a disconnect between what is the standard that fits the Hollywood movie and what is the standard that fits not only indie movies, but then within that, what could be a standard that would fit our films? Because I think the audience is there, and I see it from the press that there is an interest. Even as these films are, even the Latino press that never was interested is beginning to be interested, and that's a huge thing. Not only from the films getting done here, but from films from Argentina, you know, like Lucrecia Martel, she's so well respected here, and I mean, it's amazing, and I think that's a change. It's a change.
If I can get a question back here. Okay, so.
Hi, I'm Jessica Coles. I'm from New York City, and I was just wondering what you guys think about how, with the way technology is developing so quickly, and the internet and how easy it is for, you know, a kid like me, a high school student, to make a film, how you think that's going to affect the traditional way that films are produced, and sort of the globalization, and how, you know, whether or not the internet is going to change how much people are seeing films from different countries. And
Maria, do you have anything to address that?
Wow.
Dita, thing.
Well, I think that the globalization is changing everything, not only the film and the way of seeing cinema. I think that as filmmakers, we have to improve the ways of showing films, and the internet is one way of being seen anywhere. I think we should protect our cinematographers, but we also have to show them. So I think that the new technologies on internet are good, not so good.
So there's good and bad with it, I'm hearing. Okay.
Good evening. I was wondering, the question that you had asked the gentleman before about how he gets notable actors involved. How do you get notable, or how do you contact distributors?
In some ways it's similar. I mean, it's, again, at the beginning we'd go to film festivals, and you would, hopefully, you would be stalked by the distributors after you show the film. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way, and you sit alone in your hotel room thinking what went wrong. But for the most part that worked, and then over time you develop relationships with them, and you basically preview your slate for them. But I think the most practical way is film festivals, and sort of the major film festivals, depending on the type of film it is, you know, whether it's Sundance or Toronto or Berlin or Venice or Cannes. Yes.
If I could clarify that, what if you have a film that's in if I could clarify that, what if you have a film that's in pre-production, you have it budgeted, and it's contract dependent upon bringing a distributor on board?
Yes.
What about that type of a situation?
Well, you know, I think there you would have to figure out precisely what is to be very focused, and to have as much intelligence on the nature of the distribution that you want. So essentially what you do is figure out what you're asking for from a distributor, and then to see which distributors fit that bill, because there's such a wide range, you know, from Magnolia, let's say, to, you know, Universal Studios and everything in between. And then it's, you know, it's really knocking on the door. I mean, they're specifically set up to keep people out, because there's so much. There's so many filmmakers that sort of want to get in. They prefer to be the ones that make the inquiries, so they definitely make it difficult. Again, one way to do that, the intermediate question is, how do you associate yourself with an executive producer or an attorney or an agent or some other entity that can get you in the door? Because that's always the most difficult thing. But so I guess that would be my advice on balance. And then, you know, for the most part, again, you know, coming back to the same example, there's many others. The kids were all right. You know, every distributor saw it. Everyone passed on it. You know, it was the highest selling film at Sundance and the most bid film in Sundance. And these are people that, you know, many of which, you know, wouldn't even seriously talk about the film with us. So it's just such a quirky, peculiar place. But I guess in their logic is they'd much rather have you run this sort of gauntlet and then bring it to them as a finished product than to deal with you when it's in this more amorphous state, unless you have the kind of cast that they want and the scale of the film. But that's always a difficult thing with distribution, and rarely for any worthwhile film are they willing to jump in until you actually have finished it. So it's this endless catch-22.
Thank you. Much of the talk has been about dealing with folks at the top of the pyramid. If you have a script, how do you start out getting a film, getting people to make a film?
Yeah. I can't speak for Latin America, but for here, I think the way you start out is with, there's several conferences with people with, for instance, the IFP, which I'm the chairman of the board of, so it's a little bit self-serving, has several programs that bring people in with scripts to connect them with producers. There's endless number of script competitions. Of course, there's Sundance, which has has workshops as well, Film Independent. I think that's a really great way, if you don't otherwise have connections with producers. Again, you know, I get literally, because of the internet, you know, because of email, I get 50 solicitations a day, and I don't read any of them. To be honest. It's not worth my while.
La misma pregunta, same question, en Cuba, si alguien tiene un guión, ¿cómo es que proceden? ¿Cómo se mueve el guión en Cuba en este momento? So the thing was, you know, the same thing is, how does a script move in Cuba today?
Bueno, se mueve de diferentes maneras. Como ya les dije, hay unas pequeñitas productoras independientes que son fundamentalmente para que las tienen los más jóvenes realizadores.
¿Y no está relacionada con el gobierno o está relacionada?
No.
Okay, so
No.
they're not even, she said they're small independent companies in
no.
Cuba by young independent producers. And I asked, but is that in association with the government? She said, absolutely not.
Y entonces ellos se reúnen, tienen sus propios guiones y esos guiones los llevan hasta la realización final. A veces consiguen un poco de dinero de distintas instituciones o asociaciones, o obtienen recursos o equipos, es decir, se les presta cámaras o vestuario, utilería, y entonces ellos hacen sus películas de esa manera, así, tienen sus propios guiones y hacen sus propias películas. Y están también las instituciones que son más fuertes, que tienen detrás, por supuesto, una industria, como por ejemplo el ICAE, la televisión, educación, el área de educación. Y entonces ahí los guiones se presentan y se seleccionan los que se puedan filmar, es decir, de acuerdo con la capacidad de financiamiento que tiene el Estado. Hay más guiones que posibilidades de realización.
Eso es universal. That's universal.
La capacidad creativa sobrepasa las posibilidades de financiamiento e inclusive de la industria, de las capacidades de la industria, de poner los estudios, de poner las cámaras, las luces a la disposición de los guionistas. En Cuba pasa una cosa, y es que en Cuba ocurre que generalmente el cine que se realiza es cine de autor. El mismo director es el guionista de la película, es decir, ahí nosotros no tenemos un sistema industrial como puede existir en cualquier otro país, que normalmente el guionista es uno y el realizador es otro. No, en Cuba casi siempre el realizador y el guionista es la misma persona. Es una característica muy particular que existe en Cuba, aunque hay algunos jóvenes que sí se dedican solo a hacer guiones. Y en el caso de los jóvenes hay mucha flexibilidad, es decir, uno hace un guión y lo dirige el otro, pero no es el caso de la historia de la cinematografía cubana.
In Argentina, there's a script.
In
How does
Argentina
that
it's
move
the same
along?
thing. There are many caciques and few Indians. Mostly all of the films are written and directed by the same person. And normally all the productions are low cost, so nobody gets paid. The actors, the technicians, everyone like make a big cooperativa, as you say. And that's the way the films are done. Even the ones that get support from the National Institute, the money they give is not enough to cover the costs, so most of them never get paid. But it's the way of independent filmmaking.
Wow.
Can I say one
Sure,
thing?
please,
Just,
by all
you
means.
should look into, to answer the gentleman's question, though, you should look into Nalip the National Association of Latino Independent Producers. They have two signature pieces. One is the Writers Lab, and the other one is the Latino Producers Academy. And I have clients that participate both in the Sundance Institute and at the LPA, as we call it. And naturally, nothing beats the Sundance Institute. But given the resources that NALIP has, the organization, relative to Sundance, I've heard that it's on par. It's much more modest, but it's actually on par. And you should look into it, because I hear that it's a wonderful opportunity if you're a writer who wants to get the opportunity to work with producers, directors, editors, composers, and who will run you through the whole process.
And there's 3 questions that want to come through, but I just want to piggyback on that immediately, that we have one of the films playing at the Havana Film Festival right now is a graduate from the Latino Producers Academy in 2007. Rafi Mercado is the director of Niente, which is actually one of the 15 films in competition.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. It's like NALIP is a very excellent source, and I was part of the Latino Producers Academy 2 years ago, and I never thought I would be here today with my film. And I'll be in Austin on Thursday.
Representing Puerto Rico.
And thanks to NALIP, really Niente was able to happen. So, thank you, NALIP. NALIP really works.
Hello, good evening. Victor Taplin. I'm from New York. I'm a filmmaker. NYU School of Continuing Education Film, 1983. First of all, before I ask my question, I see there's a young lady here from Argentina. I went to school with a young man from Buenos Aires back in the 1980s when I was in film school here. His name was William Castang. His parents owned the Argentine Pavilion restaurant here in New York City on 45th Street. He was a lovely man, the nicest person you ever wanted to know, and he passed away. So I just want to say to William, wherever you are, we'll never forget you. Another question I want to ask, you guys used a cooperative system in making films in some of your countries. So for example, the actors, the directors, the technicians, they all get together, they work for nothing, and they make their film. What about your technical infrastructure, camera rentals, post-production facilities, film stocks, film labs? How do you guys pull that off? And one other thing, we hear about Latin America. Now, we know all the countries in Latin America speak Spanish, with the exception of Brazil. Now, how does the... Oh, right, thank you. That's French, yes. And thank you for the correction. How does the Portuguese language factor into the rest of the Latin American community? Thank you very much.
Well, concerning to the first question you made about the equipment, it's the same thing I said before. Some friends make like a cooperative. There's a director, the same scriptwriter, the technicians, all normally they're friends, and they decide to make a film. How do they get the equipment? Well, most of them are from our university. We have like a big, huge amount of things we'll give, of course, to our students. We make around 35 feature films a year with our equipment. The others, I think they rent or they have their own cameras. Oh, today is very easy. Anyone has a camera, and with a small camera you can make a film. Then you can blow up to 35 millimeters. This globalization made it easier to make a film. That's good, that's not good. And then for our independent films, the big cost is the film, the positive film. That's the only thing I think the filmmakers pay, because Kodak or Fuji never give the film for free. So if you have the money to buy the film, then you have a movie. That's it.
Have you ever had a film where you don't go to theatrical release, but rather than DVD or VOD sale, and if the film catches you, the sale
I have. Never by plan, you know. And I have to say those situations didn't really yield sufficient funds to actually cover the cost of the film, so the investors lose. Of course, the great advantage is that the film has a life. It's in the world. People are able to see it and experience it, which is very important, of course, to all the filmmakers. I wanted to pick up something about the whole notion of the cooperative as well. You know, I think one thing that's really destructive in our system is that it is so much geared towards this looking towards Hollywood and how can one achieve that kind of success. And even Sundance has fed into it in a really pretty vigorous and disturbing way. And you know, it's very competitive. It's actually very uncooperative. You know, it's all about money. Even when you do things cheaply, it is still about the money. It's just about smaller amounts of money, and people actually get more vicious as they fight over it. And I think it's not good for the art form of film. I mean, there's a business side of film, fine, that's by definition going to be absorbed into these business structures. But I think for young filmmakers, particularly filmmakers in school, starting off with this orientation of wanting to be successful and move to Hollywood is actually doesn't necessarily allow them to explore their art form. And in fact, things can be done very directly, very inexpensively if people pull their resources together. You see elements of it, but then there's a kind of contempt for it, though, and almost like an embarrassment, and it's not respectable. You're supposed to move up and to be successful and to work in the studios.
But for us as independent filmmakers, it just seems that these institutions or organizations want to go Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it's that. I mean, there's another reality that, of course, people make a successful money. To be able to make a successful career, but I think that you can pursue dual tracks. You could be, you know, a working filmmaker in commercial films, and you could be doing these things in parallel in more of a cooperative setting. You know, and I think we would have a much more vibrant film culture, and actually you can extend those models to distribution as well. So, you know, I mean, that would be, you know, my sort of advice to younger filmmakers is try to just forget achieving this sort of this type of typical and mainstream success, and think of all the other possibilities, you know, and look outside those normal channels.
One last question before we break out to the reception that we have outside, that we welcome you all to please join us. One last question.
I'm going to say my question in Spanish first, and then in English. It's mostly for Susana. Yo soy venezolana y en países como el mío, que está altamente polarizado, pasa, por ejemplo, mucho ahorita que jóvenes que tienen proyectos cinematográficos y los quieren realizar y que no tienen el dinero para financiarlos, van a instituciones gubernamentales, o por ejemplo la Villa del Cine, y sí hay un factor ideológico que tiene mucho peso. O sea, si no son temas en línea, digamos, con la línea del gobierno, no se los van a financiar. Entonces yo quisiera saber, digamos, en Cuba, cómo pasa en ese sentido. Basically, to sum up in English, I'm from Venezuela, and in countries that are highly polarized, like mine, young filmmakers that want to get their films financed, that have to go to government entities to get this financing. If their films aren't kind of in line with the government's ideology, you just won't get them made. I've had friends that have had their films rejected, and all the movies that I see coming from La Villa del Cine all have to do with, you know, Simón Bolívar or Fidel or Chavez. So I'm just wondering, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, I'm just wondering, how is it handled in Cuba in that way, and how can we go around that in a sense?
Bueno, te voy a contar un poquito de historia. Es decir,
Date cuenta que esta gente quiere tomar el vinito.
Sí,
Okay.
estoy hablando despacio porque después no traducen bien lo que digo, por eso estoy tratando de hablar despacio. En el caso específico de Cuba, la selección de los guiones lo hace un comité de cineastas. Es decir, los cineastas se reúnen y escogen cada 2 años quiénes van a ser los cineastas que van a elegir los guiones que va a producir el Estado cubano específicamente. Es decir, el Estado cubano pone el dinero a los guiones que escogen los propios realizadores cubanos. Pero la pregunta que me estás haciendo tiene también otra respuesta, y es que si uno quiere conocer Cuba, si uno quiere conocer la realidad cubana, con sus virtudes y sus defectos, puede acercarse a la cinematografía cubana. Porque la cinematografía cubana puede haber una película, 2, 3 películas que puedan tener un carácter propagandístico sobre la ideología que prima en Cuba. Pero las películas cubanas tienen primero es decir, se seleccionan por su nivel artístico, por su compromiso con la cultura y la sociedad cubana en general. Es decir, tú vas al cine y si esta semana has tenido la oportunidad de ver alguna de las películas cubanas que se han mostrado en este festival específicamente, La Anunciación, El Premio Flaco, Los Dioses Rotos, ninguna de esas películas constituyen una propaganda del gobierno cubano, todo lo contrario. Y están tratando de buscar dentro de la sociedad cubana cuáles son los problemas que tienen los cubanos, la prostitución, los problemas sociales de cualquier tipo que existen en Cuba hoy como pueden existir en cualquier país del mundo. Y en ese sentido, yo, si de algo me siento orgullosa, yo soy funcionaria del Instituto de Cine de Cuba, es de la honestidad de los realizadores de cine en Cuba, que hacen la obra como ellos la quieren hacer y defendiendo siempre los puntos de vista que ellos tienen. Eso es una cosa que se respeta y que yo creo que por eso es que el cine cubano es tan seguido por el pueblo cubano, porque se ve ahí, y además de eso creo que también tiene una incidencia en el éxito que tiene el cine cubano fuera de Cuba.
On that note, I want to thank our panelists for being here with us tonight. Susana Elizalde, María Jeff Latino accent, and Fernando Ramirez.